Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Collective Clicks podcast. Today, I have Eric Lyman joining us. Eric is a client of ours at Bateman Collective. He's been a client for about a year, and we ended up talking about all kinds of stuff that I think is really fascinating. He has a unique approach to doing novations in many markets. He has a single exit strategy business, which is a little bit rare, and a single marketing channel business. He also takes a little bit of a different approach to the vision for the company and the way that he runs things and the way that he wants to organize his team, et cetera. So I think you'll find this to be a pretty interesting interview, and I'll see you there. How you doing today, Eric?
Hey, doing well.
Awesome. Welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to have you here because this is our first time officially meeting, and it's fascinating to me to like learn and get to know you, your business, and everything. And I think it'll be fascinating for other people to kind of see like what you've done and what's worked for you. So for anybody tuning in that doesn't know anything about you, would you mind sharing like brief history, background, what you're doing, what your business looks like, anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. And let me say, first of all, thanks so much for having me on. Super excited to also meet you for the first time and be on the podcast. Yeah, so my name is Eric Lyman, and I'm part owner of the company Impact House Buyers. And it's a real estate flipping company, wholesaling company, you might say, not too different from any of your other clients. We've been in business for about 4 years. Um, we have a history. My partner and I both worked in corporate before we got into real estate. And we worked at a company together, Wayfair, based out of Boston. And it was through that experience meeting him that I realized that we would be good business partners. And then it was just a matter of finding what business we could do that we could do well. And we kind of took an unconventional approach to choosing the niche, the industry niche, where we actually started with our, selfish objectives. Like, I would like to have a business, number one. Number two, I would like a business that I don't have to commute into an office to do. I would like a business that doesn't require a whole bunch of capital to start, and those kind of things. And using those criteria, we sort of figured out that real estate was the best option for us. So it could have been like selling T-shirts on Amazon, maybe, or anything else, but we kept it open and we looked for what would be the best fit. Um, and from there, we just hired a couple of mentors along the way to educate ourselves. We tried to take all of the knowledge we had from corporate, like managing people, understanding numbers, analytics, and KPIs and stuff like that, and try to bring the best of what we did before into this business. So that's
Very
a short
cool.
answer.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what was your profession before this? Like, what I know you work for Wayfair, but what did you do for them?
Yeah, actually, I have a history of working in computer graphics. So for the last 15 or so years before real estate, and I actually worked in something totally different, computer animation. So I worked at a company, DreamWorks Animation, and a couple other studios, and did that whole thing. I had a great time doing it. My partner is also in computer graphics, or was in computer graphics. And at Wayfair, we were actually doing an initiative where we were creating computer models of furniture items so they could be photographed virtually. And there's a lot of efficiencies there. And so that's where we met and what we were doing.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating. So you went from like one of the prettiest industries to the most ugly industry. Is it
Yeah, right.
like your eyes with like that eye for design? Yeah,
It's kind of funny when you put it that way, but yeah, that is true. Where we are in graphics, you're in the pursuit of perfection, whatever that is for whatever it is. And with the house flipping business, you're kind of looking for those unperfect things so
yeah.
that you can make a deal. Like, put together a perfect deal. How about that? That's what we're
Yeah,
trying to do.
fair enough. Yep, the financials
Yeah.
make sense. But yeah, it's not quite pretty unless like you're doing the whole rehab yourself and everything. Have you done? I mean, you mentioned house flipping company. Yeah, I'm aware just based on our brief conversation that like flipping isn't one of your main exit strategies now. But did you guys go like the flipping route for a period of time as well?
No, we actually started with wholesaling, and then we moved into creative, and then we moved into Novations. And I explain what we do as flipping because that's as close as I think that most people would understand. But it's really the Novation process, which is a flipping process. It's just a little bit different from
Yep.
normal flipping. So
Perfect. Well, if it's okay with you, Eric, I'm just going to interrogate you about every aspect of your business. I have the curiosity
please
of
do.
understanding like who are you and why did you set this up the way you did and everything like that. Um, let's start with just a brief history of like your experience with PPC. you, because I don't know exactly where like our part together this work starts. Did you do PPC at all before you worked with us?
We did use PPC. We had a different agency for a period of, I think it was about 8 months or so before we found you guys.
Okay, so 8 months PPC, and then you started working with us, and we've worked together for how long?
About a year now, I think. I think it was
Okay.
May. Yeah, I think that's just short of a year.
Okay, fantastic. So you got about 20 months of PPC under your belt. I have to ask just because I'm curious, like what's the experience like working with Bateman Collective versus a different agency?
It's been night and day difference, to be honest. And the real reason for that, I'd say the most important things in a PPC management company is responsiveness and knowledgeability. And I think with you guys, there's also an element of thought partnership, which I think is super cool. So I didn't expect that, but working with Matt specifically, he's a sharp guy. And he actually came to us and said, I know that you've selected these markets. I also know what you're trying to do with your business. Would you consider adding this state? And here's why I think it would be a win. He actually sort of, worked with us on a thought partnership level. I didn't expect that. And I thought that was super cool.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I can see some of those changes that have been made recently in your account from a location standpoint. What So I guess we'll start there. That's as good a place as any. Like, what has the location targeting looked like over this journey? Like, and even just more broad. Like where did you start when you first started working with this other agency, and then what have you been doing more recently, and what are some of the more recent changes that have been made since then, and
Yeah.
why?
So yeah, when we started PPC, we made the decision to just go very, very wide because it was our understanding that just going wide would make those leads cheaper. And we also, we've been a virtual company from the get go. So it doesn't matter where we get leads for the most part. Over time, we have gotten smarter about each state and then, even into each county, just based on certain things like, hey, if you work in Louisiana, you're going to be working in some flood zones. And so you're never really going to know if you're going to get a flood zone property or not. So we got rid of Louisiana. Then we got more picky about time zone because we're East Coast and it's just easier for us to get in touch with leads in the same time zone. So we got rid of, the West Coast states. I think as far west as we go is Texas at this point.
Mhm.
And so it's been a gradual process. We expected that as well. As we would become more mature, we'd get more preferences and we would also allow that slight creep in expense per lead because we know that as you get more specific, you have to pay more with PPC. So it's sort of been a gradual evolution. And we're not done yet either. I'm sure we'll get even more picky in the future.
Understood. Okay, so you mostly just like have all the same areas you did before, and then you've just kind of plucked some out. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that's fair to say, with the exception of Matt's suggestions that we add in certain other ones. And so in that case, we actually did a swap. Like we would take out a state. I think we got rid of Florida. We added Texas. That was a win for us.
Yeah, Texas is a
Also,
great. I think people should do a lot more business in Texas. I call it like
yeah,
a bang for buck market because you learn like one state, and then in the process you get four massive major markets. Whereas you can't do that with a lot of
exactly.
states.
Yeah, and Brandon, be sure not to tell anybody this, but Texas is great. Don't tell anyone. Yeah, Texas is great for that reason. It's really populous, but there's also a couple of other unexpected things from our point of view that's important. Like, for example, as you get closer to the border down south, some properties don't have or need furnaces. So that's a furnace expense you can strike off the checklist when you're looking at a potential property. And a lot of properties there don't have basements either. So you don't have to worry about foundations as much. Or like flooded basements, is another one that we run into a lot in states like Pennsylvania, for example.
Yeah, yeah, understood. Well, that's fascinating. And I noticed you're doing. Is this the satellite imagery targeting? The way that you set up these specific markets?
Yeah.
Have you
So
always that way, or did you start out somewhere different?
I think now we're actually targeting by population. I could be wrong about that. But yeah, we started out by using those bright lights filters. So for anybody who doesn't know what that is, basically you take a look at a satellite image of the US at night and you see where all the bright light concentrations are, which basically tells you these are, denser areas where people live. And so you can exclude those areas that are darker. and you can get properties that are in better areas,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
location is actually very important when you get to the other side with the dispositions. Like if you're in a dense area, you can almost count on a couple offers in the first weekend. If you're in the middle of nowhere, well, we actually have a property that still is on the market and it's in the middle of nowhere. I don't know when it's going to sell.
Yeah.
So that's a lesson we
Less
learned, right?
buyers, right? Yeah. You talk to the one buyer and they don't want it. And then
And
that's
then,
it.
yeah,
Right?
just like, okay, let's wait another 3 months.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it looks like what you're doing now is kind of a combination between the bright lights model and some population filters. Like if I'm looking at Texas specifically, because like some people could think when you say you target Texas that you're just targeting Texas, which isn't exactly true because like there's a lot of rural areas in Texas that you're not touching. There's also some metro
Right.
areas that you're not touching either, like Amarillo, Lubbock, probably due to just being too small in population. But then you are targeting kind of radiuses based on what the night lights look like around some core market areas there. Like, obviously there's the big four in Texas, and then there's other
Yeah.
slightly smaller areas like Corpus Christi or El Paso, et cetera. You know?
Yeah. For us, I mean, the property has to be within 30 minutes drive time to a 75K metro. That's sort of what we use for innovation. If it's further out, that doesn't mean we can't work with it, but it's going to have to be a creative deal. It's not going to be a wholesale deal. So we're more limited in our strategies at that point.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And what kind of exits are you doing? Because you mentioned, I mean, wholesale novation. It sounds like you started with wholesale. It sounds like you're doing a lot more novations now. Like, what's the mix look like?
Yeah, we started wholesale. This was a couple of years ago. Um, then we discovered creative. We went into the creative world and we did some sub two deals. We still do a couple sub two deals whenever they come up. And then Novations really has been the thing that changed everything for us. Um, it made more sense for us in terms of what we want to do. Um, we found that there's a bit less competition on the acquisition side because you're able to give a higher offer. Not that your goal is to make high offers, but you have the ability to make a higher offer. And a lot of the folks we talk to have been beaten up by wholesalers. I mean that nicely, beaten up, but they
You're
feel
one of
beaten up. Yeah. I used to be one of those guys. They kind of feel beaten up because they have an idea for what they want to get for their property. And the only offers they're getting are these low wholesale offers, which work for some people, but for people who don't need to sell super quickly and are looking for a higher price, it's a win for us and a win for them.
that
It's
that
cool.
totally makes sense. Um, yeah, I mean, one thing I personally love about Novations too is if you're virtual, like how were you doing buyers before? Because let's just say you're in some market you've never done a deal before. I mean, wholesale usually relies on a buyer's list. I know there's some other platforms like Investor Lift. I don't know if you've used that, have experience with that. But
Yep.
one thing I've always loved about Novations is the MLS is your buyer's list, and you have just as good a buyer's list as anybody in that market.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when we were doing wholesales, we were using Investor Lift. As we got more into innovations, it became less relevant. And you're exactly right. Like the MLS is the ultimate buyer's list. And beyond that, you have an employee that's dedicated to you called a real estate agent. They handle all the buyers for you. Um, Now,
Yeah.
to be truthful, we do still manage that realtor probably more than just like you'd manage an employee. You have to make sure that they're doing everything right. But we do work really hard to get the best real estate agents we can through a referral system. So we tend to work with better ones than just your average. Um, but yeah,
Referral system. What does that mean?
yeah. Sorry. So if we are entering a new market where we have no realtors or contractors or anything, we actually have a real rock star real estate agent based in Philadelphia, and we've worked out an agreement with her. She's got connections all over the US, and we'll put out the call to her saying, hey, we've got a property in San Juan, Texas. Who do you know? And then she'll vet these real estate agents from her network. And part of the criteria that we have for her is that whoever she refers to us has to be an established player, has to be a good real estate agent, but she also has to have, or he has to have, a network of contractors that they've worked with before. So that way, when we get into the rehab side, we're not just going to Google and Googling the first result and, calling Joe Smith plumber. We're actually working with people who are good at what they do. And we also do a couple other fancy things, like we pull their business credit. They have it just so we can see if they're about to be bankrupt or not. Just a couple sanity check things. And
Yeah.
I may be jumping into a future question you had, but that's kind of how we do the virtual model with Novations. A lot of people who I tell about our company, they're like, how can you do a flip virtually? Like, isn't that a nightmare? Well, it's all about, kind of like what we were talking about before the call with limiting beliefs and what's possible. And there's a lot of things that are possible. So that's one of the things that we've made into a reality for us.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I have so many questions. Like every sentence you say, I'm just like curious about a lot more things. So number one, this realtor, is she just really nice, or do you incentivize her somehow to like? Because she's basically like your agent recruiter.
Yeah.
Sounds like. Why does she do
She,
that?
she's incentivized. Yeah. So I forgot what her percentage is. She works it out with that person. She's got some sort of DocuSign with that person for, I think it's like 10% or maybe 5%, or I don't know what it is. But so every time she makes a referral for us, she's making money as well. And the person that she's referring is also happy because they're getting a listing they wouldn't normally have.
Okay, so not only are you not having to sell the properties, someone else is getting selling the properties for you, but you also have someone else with their own money from the agent commission that you don't have to pay, basically finding those people who are selling the properties and making sure they match certain criteria that makes the whole process easier for you. Uh,
Yeah.
that's
And she's incentivized to continue doing a great job for us because the more she does a great job, the more we're going to want to use her as the referral source, the more money she makes, and we all feel happy.
yeah, that's super fascinating. The other thing I want to dig into here is like I feel like a lot of people do novations differently. Um, I don't hear of a lot of people on a national model actually making like improvements to the property on a novation model. It's more so like novation is our way that we find the buyer, but we're not going to like do anything to the property. It sounds like
Yeah,
you're often making like doing like a mini rehab on some of these novations. Am I understanding that right?
that's correct. At the very minimum, we'll always do paint and carpet or flooring on a property just because we know that putting that money into the property is going to make it sell that much faster. And getting these properties sold fast is one of our top priorities. So,
That
yeah,
totally
and
makes.
you're right. I have seen that quite a bit on Facebook groups and, talking with certain people. It seems like novations for them is something that they'll do if they can't wholesale it. Um, Maybe that's working. I'm not sure, but we always approach these deals like it's going to be innovation and like we're going to put money into it, which we do. Um, there has to be some sort of value creation there. Creating a better solution for the seller, improving the property, selling the property to somebody so that they're happy. They can. We're kind of improving the community, and it's not like we're philanthropists here, but it is nice feeling that we're actually doing something, creating value for a lot of different people in the process. So
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Um, I do imagine it's a little bit more complicated than if you weren't doing that. But like you said, if you have like the right referrals for this stuff, and it doesn't sound like you're doing any like super heavy rehabs. Normally, it's pretty light improvements.
I would say so. The top rehab that we'll go up to on a Novation is going to be about 50,000 for us. Anything past that feels a little bit risky, but I always, we're talking about that too. Like, is that another limiting belief we have? What's preventing us from doing the 75K rehab and making 75K? Maybe we'll move into that soon. We'll see.
Yeah, it's really hard to say what's best. I'm also curious, and maybe this question comes from a place of ignorance, and everybody listening to this podcast just knows way more about this than I do. So if they do, I'm sorry to all the real estate investors that feel offended. But how much risk are you taking on here? Because what's always been funky to me about Novation is you don't really technically own that property. And I know that sellers will sometimes back out of Novations and things like that. Like, can you get yourself in a situation where you've just invested 10 grand into a rehab and then the seller backs out and doesn't want to sell it? Or do you get what I'm saying? Like, do
Yeah,
you feel like
that
you're then doing a flip?
right. That is a valid concern. It's something that new people definitely need to be aware of. We are not ignorant of that either, but we do protect ourselves in a couple of key ways. The first is we have power of attorney over the property and the selling process. And by the way, there are certain schools of thought with wholesaling where you have to try to pretend you're the buyer, find a buyer, and the seller never knows. That's not really how we approach this. We do everything with transparency from start to finish. It really wouldn't work or be realistic if we didn't anyway. So we'll have a power of attorney signed that gives us the ability to fix the property, to list it, negotiate with buyers on their behalf. So we have that power. Then we also have a notarized mortgage and promissory note document for everything we do on the property. So basically, as we move into the rehab phase, before we start, we'll set ourselves up as a lien holder against the property to make sure that whatever we invest is protected by the property itself. And of course, before we do that, we have already sent it off to title. We know the property is not about to be foreclosed on, for example, so that we're protected that way. And actually, more specifically, we set up that mortgage and promissory note with our private money lenders. That's a little bit a different thing, but we're protected by that. We're protected by the power of attorney, so the mortgage note. We have a document signed and notarized that explains the purpose of the rehab as well, so that it would stand up in the court of law if it ever came to that. Basically, that this rehab is done for improvements and the sellability of the property. I think that's not really a word, but for the performance of the sale of the property, that's what it's for. So you're not just going to, have a new kitchen put in and then tell us to go away because you like it so much you want to live there now. So that's kind of like
That's
how we protect
exactly what went
ourselves.
through my mind when I thought
Yeah,
about this strategy.
exactly. But also beyond that, we ensure that the property is vacant before we start rehab, that we have a lockbox put on, just some practical things like that. And we haven't had a problem with those things in place.
Okay,
But yeah,
fair enough.
if
Yeah, that,
you're a
very
wholesaler and
fascinating.
you're like, hey, I'm just gonna do this as a novation and like you whatever, replace all the carpets and then you don't have any protections in place, that would be a huge red flag for sure.
Okay, got it. Okay, that makes a ton of sense. I feel more comfortable knowing exactly how you do that, and it sounds like it's working for you.
Yeah.
Let's talk numbers here. Whatever numbers you do know, like when it comes to like your business as a whole, and it comes to it comes to PPC as a marketing channel. Which, by the way, do you guys do other channels as well?
Not anymore. We've done everything in the past, but we just do PPC these days.
Okay,
In
cool.
fact, there's
I
a,
can't
a
say I
funny
don't.
story I can there's a funny story I can tell you. Like I said, we've tried everything as far as marketing. And one of the ideas
Yeah.
that I came up with, which blew up in my face, was this driving for dollars virtually idea that I had. I'm like, hey, driving for dollars is great. We do it virtually. It's just too expensive to hire somebody to drive the streets. What if we just use Google Street View to look at the properties and just, capture the address and skip trace it and give them a call? And so I had three virtual assistants doing this 8 hours a day, and we were generating like 10,000 records per month, and we were cold calling and texting all of them. This is like a couple of years ago, and we would actually turn a deal, but we would only do one deal for every 10,000 records that we ingested. It was the least efficient thing you could possibly do. So you chalk it up to maybe creativity, but yeah, you have to test things, and then when they don't work, stop doing them.
Yeah, yeah, totally fair. Well, that's cool. I'm glad PPC works for you guys. Let's talk overall numbers. And what I think that I'm thinking like return on ad spend, uh, cost per lead, leads per contract, deal spreads, like all that kind of stuff. Like what are the key metrics that you look at, and are you willing to share some of those?
Yeah, 100%. So I believe, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I think it updates fairly frequently. I think our cost per lead is about $500, and our cost per deal is going to be anywhere between 1,500 and like 2,250. I think I I did see it
Yeah.
once was up to 3,000. So maybe like the average is somewhere between there. Let's just say $2,000 per contract. Sounds about right.
Okay.
Um, we're getting about 1 in 10 of those raw leads under contract, and I don't know. This is kind of where it differs between different companies. I'm pretty picky about which leads I qualify to the opportunity level. So for anyone
Mhm.
listening, you've got your raw leads, and then after you've spoken with them, they're agreeable to talk to you. Their property is not about to fall over. Then they become an opportunity, somebody you can make an offer to. So I'm pretty damn picky about who I will qualify up to that level. But once I do qualify them, I've got a 1 in 50 chance of closing that opportunity, which is pretty cool.
A
Um,
one in what chance?
like a 1 in 2. So 50% chance
Oh,
of
one.
closing an
I
opportunity
thought you
to
said one
qualify.
in 50.
No, no,
That's
no.
really,
Yeah, 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 for
yeah,
sure.
you know how good the sales guy you are. You know, once I pick just the right opportunity, it only takes me 50 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. And so, yeah, so like those are the numbers. What is it? I think the return on ad spend is a 6 multiplier for us. And so that basically translates to, what is that? 6 times 2. Don't ask me. I'm horrible at math on the fly. But our deal
Six,
spreads, we target something between 20 and 30K as a profit spread on these Novation deals. And we also
okay.
target a 1-to-1 rehab to profit ratio. So if we have to spend 40K on a rehab, we want to make 40K. We don't want to make 20K. Otherwise, it's better for us to use that spend on some other property that's got a better return.
That totally makes sense. Okay. That is really helpful to know, like overall what those metrics look like. Very cool. So at this point, you're in a handful of markets. I mean, probably more than a handful. You've got basically one exit strategy, which is novations with a little bit of rehab put into the deal.
Yeah.
And one marketing channel. It's interesting because, you know, everybody, like, you'll find different people who are like, you need to have 17 marketing channels. And then somebody else says, you need to have every exit strategy in the book. And some other people say like, oh, you shouldn't be in a lot of markets. Like, everybody kind of has their own opinion on that. What I've noticed is there's kind of like three things that a wholesale business can be diversified or focused on, which, you know, diversified and focused are just two words that mean opposite things, but both are positive. Right.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
but
Right.
was basically your exit strategies, your marketing channels, and your number of markets. And yeah, so it's interesting. Like, a lot of people, like, their strategy is every exit strategy, every marketing channel, one market, versus your kind of every market, but then you only do one exit strategy and one marketing channel. Which is fascinating. It's like, in my opinion, you lose focus when you have too many in a combination of those things. So it's not about, like, some people say it, you know, you lose focus if you're going to multiple markets, or you lose focus if you have too many marketing channels, or whatever the case is. Like, I think it's just kind of a balance amongst, like, those three things, that, like, you just can't be diversified on every one of those. You can't do every marketing channel with every exit strategy in every market, unless you're going to be like, you know, the biggest wholesaler in the nation. And, like, you know, at some point, some companies are going to do that because they're going to hit that level of scale where that's necessary. But, you know, with a smaller company, it's
Yeah.
fascinating, like, what you chose to do a lot of, and then what you chose to be really focused on.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree with that. And I think also it really depends on your goals as companies and individuals. And maybe it's part of our Wayfair experience where at that company, they really drilled into us efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. And so we actually have a 2-person company, you know, myself and my business partner, and we're able to run everything. And it's because we have, I believe it's because we focused in so much on what works, and we're able to get the most out of what we're doing versus what you were saying before about having PPC, but also cold callers and, you know, email blasts and Facebook ads and whatever other marketing channels there are. I think for us, it's better to focus in and be efficient. It also gives us an element of freedom back because, you know, a few years ago, 3 years ago, we had 5 or 6 virtual assistants, and we found ourselves kind of moving back into this Wayfarian kind of territory. At Wayfair, we had a team of 30 people we were overseeing. And part of the reason we became entrepreneurs was so that that was one of the things we could stop doing. And we found ourselves kind of managing these big teams again. And 5 people is not big, but it's sure, you know, 5 times more than one person. Um, or, you know, so
Get it?
that's one of the things we really enjoy. It's like the freedom. It's not just financial freedom or time freedom. It's also like how much stuff is in your head at one time freedom, if that makes sense. Like simplicity
I get it.
freedom is something that we both really prioritize.
Yeah. I mean, now that you mentioned it, it's a simple business model. Like, you just got you doing acquisitions, your partner does dispositions. You have one marketing channel. That channel is entirely outsourced to an agency. So the amount of mental
Right.
effort you need to put into that is very minimal.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty sure. Although I know you know, you still got to, like, review your metrics, and you can't just leave an agency
Yeah.
completely unmanaged. Um, but the, yeah, so your marketing's kind of on autopilot, and then you got one exit that you're doing for your deals. So you just take the leads and
Yeah,
figure it out. Like it's simple. I feel like you could
it's a
just go
beautiful
sit on a
thing. I
beach
mean,
and actually like be able to relax. Whereas most entrepreneurs, they want to do that. And like, they just, myself included, like I just, like there's way too much stuff going on in my head, way too many things that need to get done and different
yeah,
moving pieces. And some of that just is the vision of like what you want for your business. And it sounds like for you, that was kind of escaping that. That was
yeah,
important
I
to you.
think that's a good point to highlight. Like if you're going to start a business and go into business for yourself with all the risks that comes with owning a business, you may as well have the business that you want to have, right? Don't just create a business without thinking about it first and end up in a situation that's, something undesirable.
Yeah. Yeah. It totally makes sense. So this is like the end vision for you. It's just like, it's you and your partner and let's just make this as efficient as we can. But like we're a 2-person operation and we're just going to do like whatever's reasonable, like without, obviously if the goal is maximize revenue with 2 people, then you'd probably be like, you could work an unlimited number of hours to make that happen. But it sounds like just the fact that you told me you don't like California because the time zone doesn't work for your work-life balance tells me a
Yeah.
little something where it's like, you kind of have these like kilometers and
Yeah.
some of those things are like, you don't want a big team and you don't want to work more than a certain number of hours, most likely. And then you're just looking to generate a good income while being within those parameters.
Yeah. I would say that's true, but I would also say that we're still in a sort of a journey. So our total vision where we want to be ultimately is, sitting behind a huge portfolio of rental properties that we have, like a 300 door strong kind of thing, because my partner and I are both fathers and we have families and kids and we want to pass on a legacy to our kids. And so that's probably what that looks like. But I would say you're right. I mean, for right now, the model we've built is working for us. So that's a very satisfying and kind of a happy place to be.
Well, and it's a great path to get to, where you're wanting to be. That's something I'm
Yeah.
always jealous about of our clients is that they're like their active income and their passive income strategies are just like so closely related and they can just kind of marry each other. You know,
Yeah.
we don't get that
Yeah.
in marketing like you do in real
Right.
estate.
Yeah.
Like
I'm sure.
definitely, it's really attractive about the industry. So that's super cool. Um, and I think you told me you're launching some sort of like educational product. I don't know if you call it like a coaching program or like a mentorship. Like, help me understand what is it and what does it look like?
Yeah. It's closer to a coaching program versus a mentorship. So it's not one on one mentoring, but it's called Investor PowerUp. So you can find it at investorpowerup.com. And it basically is a program that we're aiming towards people who are either not exactly brand new, but sort of new with a couple deals under their belts or intermediates who are having trouble scaling to the next level. And it's really heavily focused on systems and processes, but also the Novation process and how we do that virtually. And it's really designed to help elevate, that investor to, from a struggling position to a competent and eventually thriving position. And so we're going to be basically teaching everything we spoke about today. What we do with Novations, how we do it, the contracts we put into place, how those are structured. Also, how we work with private money lenders because we're not funding these rehabs ourselves. We're using other people's money. So stuff like that, stuff that I think that most junior people may have heard about, but they don't know how to do. People who just, you know, it definitely praiseworthy to just like hustle and get into it and like be scrappy and learn how to do something. But I think a lot of people get stuck there. And so the program is really designed to help them get out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Even after just talking to you, like I can tell this program will have a unique space in the marketplace because you're a unique dude in the marketplace. And what I mean
Yeah.
by that is like you have a different approach to like how you run your business. And I guess you could say a more simplistic way. And you have a natural inclination towards systems and processes that I'd say the
Yeah.
average person in the industry does not. So that's fascinating. Like I haven't seen this program, but I fully believe it's unique and like to
Yeah.
the right person will like match them really, really well. So that'll be fascinating to see how that goes. So if somebody's interested in that, do they just go to that website that you mentioned?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. You can see a short video we put together there, and there's a link to book with me so we can have a strategy call. And if we're a good fit, we're a good fit. If we're not a good fit, we'll let you know that too.
Yeah, that's
Just
good.
like
It's always good when you don't have
just like what I It's exactly
Things
what I
go
do
wrong.
with the acquisition stuff, right? Like if we're a fit, we're a fit. If we're not a good fit, that's okay.
Yeah. I think things go wrong in a business when they start getting so much overhead that they have to like start working with people that like just to hit targets or like it's like that's
Hmm.
like if you like start taking on these properties that aren't like the right kind of property that you want, but like at the end of the day, like your manager's not going to be happy with you if you're not able to lock up at least this number of contracts per month, whatever.
Yeah.
Or you get what I'm saying. That's something super fascinating about what you do is you just kind of like if it's good and it matches what you want, you'll take it. But you'll very easily say no to things that don't match the criteria for you, which is fascinating. Um,
Yeah. That's totally true. And I think it also sort of points to this abundance mentality, right? Or scarcity mentality. Um, there's so many houses in the US. There's so many people that are going through hard times. Like there won't be a shortage of houses or motivated sellers in our lifetime, you know. And it's just about, can you actually help them? Or is this really just like, is it a money play? If it's a money play, then your motivations are in the wrong place.
yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I love that too. How you're doing it like in a very ethical way that adds value to the property and to the seller and to the community, and all those things. So yeah, that's super neat. Well, thank you, Eric, for joining. I think I hope anybody listening recognizes how cool this interview was and how unique of our good podcast. I'm super grateful for that. And to everybody listening, I'll see you next week.